Okay, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is Nur Harazin. Palestinians woke up on the voices of explosions.
On October 7th, we experienced the worst savagery in this century.
This time is different. It's a different story.
This is a conflict that many see has no end in sight. As of September this year, the war has taken lives of more than 40,000 Palestinian people. Since last October 7th, our correspondents inside Gaza, Israel, and the West Bank have been covering many of the complex issues that shape the Israel-Hamas war. In this video, we examine 3 critical issues that continue to fuel the crisis. The first is what's been making headlines every day: the disproportionately high number of civilian casualties in Gaza. To understand how this happened, we must revisit the early days of Israel's incursion into the enclave, which began from the north.
This paper that I'm holding in my hand is a brochure that the Israeli warplanes threw on the people who are residing in northern Gaza and also in Gaza City. It clearly says that even the shelters in central Gaza should be evacuated.
People headed south as instructed, with white flags like this becoming a common sight for Gazans trying to avoid being targeted. Many of them initially believed that the civilian areas of the major southern cities would be safe. However, this proved to be far from the truth.
The Israeli warplanes launched several strikes, even though all of these cities, Deir al-Balah, Rafah, Khan Yunis, are all safe areas where displaced people should go for evacuation.
70% of our installation that had been impacted during the shelling, it is in the southern part of Gaza that it should be a safe zone, but unfortunately it's not true.
Amid the notable lack of safe places at the onset of the war, our reporter in Israel asked about an officially designated humanitarian area with clear-cut security promises.
Will your war cabinet create a buffer zone later for the southern safety in Gaza?
Now what I will tell you is that there is this safe zone, safe humanitarian zone in the south. And so hopefully we'll get the people and we'll get the assistance both in a place where they'll be out of harm's way.
Finally, in December 2023, Israel had designated this area, called Al-Mawasi, as such a zone. Yet, the safe zone did not live up to its name. This July, Israeli forces attacked the area at least 10 times, dropping 8 2,000-pound bombs, which killed at least 90 people. These images coming out of multiple places of the Gaza Strip have become synonymous with the war.
I was going to buy candies from the store when they bombed the mosque. I fainted and woke up here in the hospital. I found my leg had been cut.
Why is there so much collateral damage in civilian areas? The Israeli military's explanation can be summed up in 2 words: human shields. For example, the Israel Defense Forces once accused Hamas of sending over 100 women and children to a compound it was targeting. Throughout its campaigns, including those involving civilian infrastructure, the IDF has failed to distinguish between targets and focus solely on Hamas fighters.
This is also another strange logic. It's Hamas. What do you mean, it's Hamas? How do you know who is Hamas and who is not?
Despite this complex situation, Israel has made many controversial military decisions, even at the risk of violating international humanitarian law. A case in point is the Al-Shifa Hospital, the largest medical complex in Gaza.
We do have information that Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad uses some hospitals in the Gaza Strip, including the Al-Shifa hospital, as a way to conceal and support their military operations and hold hostages.
And on the other hand, Al-Shifa hospital called upon the international community to send a group of experts to investigate the fact that there is no Hamas infrastructure under hospitals.
Al-Shifa came under siege by Israeli forces in November 2023, leading to a critical shortage of power and supplies.
Is totally unacceptable. Hospitals are not battlegrounds.
An Israeli strike happened just on the front gate of Al-Shifa hospital. 15 people were killed. The Israeli side said that one of the ambulances was carrying a Hamas member, but the Palestinians are asking an important question. Is it okay to kill 15 people just because one of them is a Hamas member?
The most recent Israeli military action in the hospital occurred in March this year and was significantly more intense. By the time the operation concluded, much of Al-Shifa hospital had been destroyed. Israel confirmed that it had killed hundreds of Hamas members, while its soldiers also assisted in delivering aid materials to help the hospital maintain its core functions. However, Israel's decision to turn a hospital into an active war zone against Hamas has drawn international condemnation, with the legality of the operation and the accuracy of Israel's claims fiercely disputed. When shall we see an end, or at least a pause, of such punishment of the civilians in Gaza? That hinges on whether the two warring sides can reach a ceasefire. That is an urgent necessity for many Gazans and Israelis.
Protesters in Israel have returned to the streets to demand their government make a deal to free the remaining hostages being held by Hamas.
Murderer, the crowd chants, blaming Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the deaths, saying he doesn't want a deal.
The U.S., Qatar, and Egypt working to facilitate a deal. A breakthrough still seems elusive, nearly a year into the war.
And why is that? One of the recent points of contention lies here.
This is the Philadelphia corridor.
The Philadelphia corridor. A 14-kilometer long strip in Gaza running along its border with Egypt. Our correspondent Noor Harazian, who was reporting from inside Gaza before leaving in May, sent her children into Egypt this January through the Rafah crossing on the corridor.
Very, very hard day on me.
The region eventually came under Israeli control, also in May. Under a May version of the ceasefire deal that Hamas reportedly accepted, Israel would be required to immediately withdraw from densely populated areas of Gaza in exchange for the release of hostages. However, facing mounting domestic pressure, Prime Minister Netanyahu has refused to give up control of the Philadelphia corridor.
You have to understand that the centrality of the Philadelphia corridor to the arming of Gaza, to the arming of Hamas. You want to destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities, you can't let Hamas rearm. It's obvious. So you have to control the corridor.
That's an assessment that even some members of its own cabinet, including the defense minister at the time, disagreed. While Netanyahu accuses Hamas of not being serious about negotiations, critics argue that his hardline approach prioritizes the defeat of Hamas over the safe release of hostages, two key Israeli war goals that now seem to be in conflict.
Would that stop the invasion?
No. Hostages will not stop. There is only very small minority that against war.
We have to engage in negotiations. We have to do it now. They say that the only solution is to destroy, to flatten Gaza. They never mention the hostages, never.
As divisions of opinion persist, time is running out. Over 60 of the 250 Israelis taken hostage are still believed to be alive in Gaza, where the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate.
At this time, we do not have access to the hostages to check on their well-being or provide any medication to them Unfortunately, that access is not so simple as one side or the other saying yes. It has to come in the form of an agreement so that the necessary security conditions are there, so that we know the location of the hostages, which currently we do not.
Despite all of this, a poll this year in Israel shows a slight majority of Israelis prefer not to relinquish control of the Philadelphia corridor, even at the expense of a hostage deal. This issue continues to divide Israeli society. The October 7th Hamas attacks changed many things. The Gaza Strip is in flames, and the conflict has now spread to other areas.
This is the direction of Lebanon.
With the situation escalating on all fronts, the question remains, will a two-state solution, where both Israel and Palestine coexist as independent countries, ever be achievable? The war in Gaza has put the peace process on hold. But at the same time, increasing pressure in the West Bank, the other Palestinian territory, is further complicating the situation. Earlier this year, our reporter visited the area. Locals have long been complaining about the growing number of Israeli settlements. Since last year, the atmosphere has become much more tense.
Debates intensified over the Israeli settlement and the possibility of annexing even the entire region.
This is the village of Kusra, nestled in the heart of the West Bank. On October the 11th last year, just a few days after the war in Gaza began, 6 Palestinians were murdered.
It was a horrible day. More than 40 settlers and 2 snipers came to attack us. Then the men from the town came to help us to leave the house. But because of that, they killed 4 of them.
The United Nations has opposed Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, saying that they undermine the two-state solution. Yet today, around 700,000 Israeli citizens live in these areas, as shown by these colored dots. Many of these Israelis are also on edge about their Arab neighbors. Take, for example, the settlement of Malay Shamran.
On 7th of October, 10 in the morning, 3.5 hours after the attack began, he started shouting in Arab, "Go up to Malay Shamran, like they are going up Kfar Aza, and do to them what they do to the Jews."
Fortunately, nothing happened to Malay Shamran on that day.
I'm taking it for any case.
The mounting pressure is eroding the political trust needed to advance a two-state solution. This year, a new factor has emerged in the peace process equation, marked by a significant diplomatic development. Rival Palestinian factions, including Hamas from Gaza and Fatah from the West Bank, signed the Beijing Declaration on ending division and strengthening Palestinian national unity, thanks to negotiations held in China.
It is a very important directive and a principal document, and it also represents Chinese willingness and Chinese understanding in this region for the future peace between different factions among the different Palestinian groups. But I don't think it should be considered as a very quick and a very one-day implemented document. It should be understood as a very fundamental principle document in the future.
In 2007, Hamas split from Fatah, partly due to opposing the two-state solution. How will this renewed unity impact the peace process, especially with Israel determined to completely dismantle Hamas and claiming it's close to doing so? In May, the United Nations General Assembly overwhelmingly supported Palestine's qualification for future UN membership.
A yes vote is a vote for Palestinian existence. It is not against any state.
Among the dissenting votes were the US and Israel.
That's what you're doing, shredding the UN Charter.
The US stated that its vote against the bid, quote, does not reflect opposition to Palestinian statehood, emphasizing that statehood will only come from a process involving direct negotiations between the parties. Amid rising tensions between the Israelis and Palestinians, and the renewed reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas, the prospects of future negotiations remain more uncertain than ever.
And this is Gaza.
Today, these three issues still hang in the balance, further intensifying the gravity of the war as time progresses.